Sometimes all it takes is $1 to change everything. Sometimes hope comes disguised as something everyone else has given up on. In the heart of Texas, a young girl named Maya and her faithful dog, Scout, faced their darkest hour with nothing but a single crumpled dollar bill and a dream of shelter. That dollar bought them a rusted, forgotten RV that most people would call junk. But inside that broken-down home on wheels, they discovered something extraordinary. Hidden journals filled with stories, hand-drawn maps leading to mysterious places, and a collection of rare coins that would change not just their lives, but their entire community. What Maya found in that old RV would teach her that sometimes the most valuable treasures are hidden in the most unlikely places. But could one teenager's discovery really transform an entire town? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun painted the Texas sky in shades of amber and gold, but Maya Washington couldn't appreciate its beauty. She sat on the concrete steps of what used to be her grandmother's apartment building, watching the maintenance crew seal the condemned sign across the front door. Her fingers traced the edges of a worn dollar bill, the sum total of everything she had left in this world. Scout, a brown and white mixed breed with intelligent eyes and a permanently wagging tail, pressed his warm body against her legs. He'd been her constant companion for 3 years now, ever since Grandma Ruth had found him as a scraggly puppy behind the church dumpster. "That dog's got good sense," Grandma Ruth used to say. "He knows quality people when he sees them." Maya buried her face in Scout's thick fur, breathing in his familiar scent of sunshine and loyalty. At 17, she'd already learned that life could change in an instant. 6 months ago, she'd been a straight-A student with dreams of college and a grandmother who believed she could accomplish anything. Today, she was homeless. The building had been sold to developers who wanted to tear it down and build something modern. The new owners had given all the tenants 30 days to find new places to live. For most people, that might have been enough time. But most people hadn't spent the last 6 months watching their grandmother fight cancer while trying to keep up with rent, medical bills, and the rising cost of everything else. Maya had dropped out of school to work at the local diner, bringing home barely enough to cover their expenses. She'd held Grandma Ruth's hand through chemotherapy treatments, helped her to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and read her favorite psalms when the pain got too bad to sleep. She'd done everything she could think of, but it hadn't been enough. Ruth Washington had passed peacefully on a Thursday morning in March, leaving Maya alone, except for Scout. The funeral had taken the last of their savings. Maya had sold everything of value: Ruth's jewelry, the old television, even the dishes that had been wedding gifts from 40 years ago. She'd applied for assistance programs and begged for extensions on the rent, but bureaucracy moved slowly, and landlords moved fast. By the time help arrived, Maya was already packing what little remained of their belongings. She stood up now, dusting off her worn jeans and looking down the street toward Jimmy's used car and RV lot. The hand-painted sign promised deals so good they're practically stealing, which Maya hoped was true. She'd heard Jimmy sometimes sold broken-down vehicles for almost nothing to people who needed transportation more than perfection. The walk to the lot took 20 minutes, Scout trotting beside her with his tail creating its own small dust cloud. Maya had always admired his optimism. No matter how bad things got, Scout seemed to believe that good things were just around the corner. Today, she tried to borrow some of that faith. Jimmy Castellanos was a short, round man with calloused hands and kind eyes. He'd been running the lot for 30 years, and he'd seen plenty of desperate people in that time. But something about the young girl with the loyal dog touched his heart differently. Maybe it was the way she held herself, proud despite her circumstances, or the way she spoke to him with respect, even though she was asking for help. "I'll be straight with you, Mika," Jimmy said, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. "Most of what I got in your price range ain't worth the metal it's made from. But there's one old RV back there that might work. Engine's shot, tires are bald, and the inside looks like something died in it. But the bones are solid. Maya followed him to the back corner of the lot, where a faded blue and white Winnebago sat like a forgotten relic from the 1980s. The paint was peeling, one window was cracked, and rust had claimed significant territory. Around the wheel wells, it looked like the kind of thing most people would drive straight to the junkyard. How much? Maya asked, though she already knew the answer would determine whether she had a home tonight or not. Jimmy studied her face, taking in the exhaustion around her eyes and the determined set of her jaw. He glanced at Scout, who had immediately begun exploring the RV with his nose, tail wagging as if he'd found buried treasure. Tell you what, Jimmy said slowly, that old thing's been sitting here for 2 years. Previous owner died, family didn't want it, and I can't seem to find anybody foolish enough to take it off my hands. Give me that dollar you've been holding. On two, and it's yours. I'll even throw in a set of keys that might or might not work. Maya stared at him, wondering if she'd heard correctly. $1? $1. But I ain't making no promises about what you'll find inside. And you'll need to get it towed off my lot. I can't have it just sitting here forever. Maya looked at the RV again, trying to see it through Scout's enthusiastic eyes rather than her own practical ones. The exterior might be rough, but it had 4 walls and a roof. It had windows that let in light and a door that could lock. It was more than she'd had an hour ago. She handed Jimmy the dollar bill, her last physical connection to security. He pressed a set of keys into her palm, and suddenly Maya Washington was a homeowner. There's a vacant lot about 3 miles from here, Jimmy said quietly. Old Hernandez place. Maria won't mind if you park there temporary-like, long as you keep it clean and don't cause no trouble. Tell her Jimmy sent you. Maya nodded, overwhelmed by the kindness of this stranger who'd just changed her life. Scout barked once, as if to say he approved of the transaction, and Jimmy chuckled. That dog's got good sense, he said unknowingly, echoing Grandma Ruth's words. He knows you made the right choice. The tow truck driver was a friend of Jimmy's, and he agreed to move the RV to the Hernandez lot for free. Consider it a housewarming gift, he said with a wink. Maya spent the ride in the cab beside him, watching her new home bounce and sway on the flatbed behind them. The vacant lot was actually quite peaceful, surrounded by mesquite trees and wildflowers, with a view of the distant hills. Mrs. Maria Hernandez came out of her small house as they were unhitching the RV, and her weathered face broke into a smile when she saw Scout. "Ah, you have a good dog," she said, offering Scout a piece of dried meat from her apron pocket. "Dogs always know good people. You can stay as long as you need me here. Just keep it quiet after 10 o'clock. My husband goes to bed early." That first night in the RV was both the worst and best of Maya's recent memory. The worst because the interior smelled like old cigarettes and mildew. The refrigerator didn't work, and something was definitely wrong with the plumbing. But it was also the best, because for the first time in months, Maya fell asleep in a space that belonged to her, with Scout curled up on the narrow bed beside her, both of them safe and out of the elements. She lay awake for a long time, listening to the night sounds of rural Texas. Crickets chirping, a distant owl calling, Scout's gentle snoring. The RV creaked and settled around them like an old house getting comfortable. Maya thought about Grandma Ruth, who would have found something positive to say about their situation. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," she would have said. "Sometimes you got to lose everything to find out what really matters." Maya pulled Scout closer, grateful for his warm presence. Tomorrow, she'd start figuring out how to make the RV livable. She'd look for work, maybe see about getting back into school. She'd take things one day at a time, the way Grandma Ruth had taught her. But tonight, she was home. 3 days later, Maya had transformed the RV from uninhabitable to merely uncomfortable. She'd scrubbed every surface with dollar store cleaning supplies, replaced the worst of the torn upholstery with fabric remnants from the thrift store, and managed to get the water pump working well enough for basic needs. The refrigerator remained. stubbornly broken, but she'd found a small cooler at a garage sale that would do for now. Scout had claimed the dinette area as his personal headquarters, where he could keep watch over both the front and back of their new home while staying close. To Maya, he seemed to have adjusted to RV life better than she had, treating each creaking sound and mechanical quirk as just another interesting aspect of their adventure. Maya was on her hands and knees, trying to secure a loose section of linoleum flooring when she noticed something strange. The floorboard beneath the torn vinyl seemed to sit differently than the others, slightly raised, as if something underneath was preventing it from lying flat. She pressed down on it experimentally, and it shifted with a hollow sound that suggested empty space below. Scout immediately abandoned his post and came over to investigate, sniffing intently at the spot where Maya's hands were working. "What do you think, boy?" Maya asked, sitting back on her heels. "Should we see what's under here?" Scout's tail wagged encouragingly, and Maya decided to take that as a yes. She found a butter knife in the tiny kitchen drawer and carefully worked it under the edge of the loose board. With a little pressure, the entire section lifted away, revealing a hidden compartment roughly the size of a shoebox. Maya's heart hammered as she peered into the dark space. Grandma Ruth had always said curiosity was both a blessing and a curse, and Maya had never felt that truth more keenly than in this moment. Part of her wanted to replace the floorboard and pretend she'd never found it. The other part, the part that had inherited Ruth's stubborn determination, needed to know what someone had thought important enough to hide. She reached into the compartment and felt something wrapped in what seemed like oilcloth. Her fingers closed around it carefully, and she lifted out a package about the size of a hardcover book. The oilcloth fell away to reveal a leather-bound journal, its cover worn smooth by countless hands. Scout whined softly, as if sensing the significance of the moment, and pressed closer to Maya's side. She opened the journal to the first page and found herself looking at careful handwriting in blue ink. "Property of Elias Hart. If found, please contact the First Baptist Church of Millfield, Texas. But if you're reading this, I'm probably beyond needing it back." The first entry was dated nearly 10 years ago, June 15th. "Bought this old RV today with the last of my savings. Not much to look at, but it'll serve my purposes. Sometimes a man needs to start over completely, and there's something about having everything you own fit into 30 feet of metal and fiberglass that clarifies what really matters. I've been thinking about legacy lately, what we leave behind, how we're remembered. Most folks think legacy is about money or monuments, but I think it's simpler than that. I think it's about the kindness we spread and the hope we kindle in dark places. This journal will be my record of that work. And maybe, if I'm lucky, someone else will find it someday and understand that even small acts of goodness matter more than we know." Maya turned the page, her hands trembling slightly. The entries continued, documenting what appeared to be a deliberate campaign of helping people in need. Elias had used the RV to travel throughout their small Texas town and the surrounding counties, finding families in crisis and offering assistance. July 3rd, met a family today whose house burned down last month. Insurance won't cover temporary housing, and the father's been sleeping in his truck while the mother and kids stay at the shelter. Left them $500 cash and a note saying it was from a friend who's been blessed. The look on their faces when they found it was worth more than any church service I've ever attended. August 18th. Found out Mrs. Rodriguez's granddaughter needs surgery, but they can't afford the copay. Her pride won't let her accept charity directly, so I paid the hospital anonymously and told them it was from a medical foundation. Sometimes the best help is the kind people don't have to feel shame about accepting. Page after page revealed similar acts of quiet generosity. Elias had helped families facing eviction, students who couldn't afford college textbooks, elderly people who needed home repairs they couldn't manage alone. But what struck Maya most was how carefully he'd planned each intervention, always finding ways to preserve the dignity of those he helped. Scout seemed to sense her emotional state and laid his head across her lap, providing comfort she didn't even know she needed. Maya continued reading, fascinated by this man who had lived in her current home and dedicated his later years to anonymous kindness. October 12th. Been working on something bigger lately. Found several families who are struggling with similar problems: medical debt, job loss, kids who need help with school supplies. Instead of helping them individually, I'm thinking about bringing them together somehow. Sometimes people need community more than they need money. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the knowledge that they're not alone. The later entries revealed Elias's evolving philosophy of help. He'd moved beyond simply giving money to creating connections between people who could support each other. He'd organized informal networks of neighbors helping neighbors, always working behind the scenes to make it seem natural rather than orchestrated. November 30th. This old RV has been good to me, but I won't be needing it much longer. Doctor says I've got maybe 6 months. Funny how that news doesn't scare me as much as I thought it would. I've been thinking about who might need this place when I'm gone, who might carry on the work in their own way. Ruth Washington's granddaughter comes to mind. That girl has something special in her, the same fire Ruth has, but tempered with genuine compassion. I've watched her taking care of her grandmother with such patience and love. If something happens to Ruth, that child will need help. Maybe I can arrange for this old RV to find its way to her when the time comes. Maya's hands shook as she read her own name, her grandmother's name, written in this stranger's careful script. She flipped ahead, looking for more references to herself or Grandma Ruth, but the entries became increasingly sporadic. The handwriting grew shaky, and the final entry was brief. January 8th. Time's getting short now. Made arrangements with Jimmy at the lot. Told him when the time comes. If a young black girl with a dog comes looking for shelter, sell her this RV for whatever she can afford. Doesn't matter if it's $1 or $100. The price isn't the point. The point is making sure the right person finds what they need when they need it most. I've hidden some things around this RV that might help whoever comes after me. Think of it as a treasure hunt. But the real treasure isn't gold or silver. It's the reminder that kindness is currency that never loses value, and hope is a flame that can be passed from one person to another without diminishing the original fire. Take care of each other. That's all any of us can really do. Maya closed the journal and sat in stunned silence. Scout whined softly and nudged her hand with his nose, as if checking to make sure she was still present. The implications of what she'd read were overwhelming. This wasn't just a coincidence. Elias Hart had planned for her to find this place, had somehow arranged for her to inherit not just shelter, but a mission. She looked around the RV with new eyes, wondering what other secrets Elias might have hidden. The journal mentioned things hidden throughout the vehicle, and now Maya noticed details she'd missed before. Certain panels seemed slightly loose. Some storage compartments appeared to be deeper than they should be. Even the way Scout had been sniffing certain areas made more sense now. He might be detecting scents left by previous hiding places. Maya reopened the journal to the first page and read Elias's words again. Sometimes a man needs to start over completely, and there's something about having everything you own fit into 30 feet of metal and fiberglass that clarifies what really matters. She understood now that she hadn't just inherited a home, she'd inherited a responsibility. Elias Hart had spent years helping people in their community, and somehow he'd chosen her to continue that work. The question was whether a 17-year-old girl with $1 and a dog could possibly live up to such a legacy. Scout seemed to have no such doubts. He wagged his tail and returned to his post by the window, ready for whatever adventure might come next. Maya spent the next morning reading through Elias's journal again, searching for clues about the other hiding places he'd mentioned. Scout remained close by, occasionally lifting his head to watch her with alert eyes, as if he too sensed they were on the verge of something important. As she carefully turned each page, looking for details she might have missed the first time, a piece of folded paper slipped from between the journal's back pages and fluttered to the floor. Scout immediately pounced on it, tail wagging, and Maya gently retrieved it from his mouth. "Good boy," she murmured, unfolding what appeared to be a hand-drawn map. The paper was thick and yellowed with age, covered in careful pencil markings that showed clear familiarity with the local area. Maya recognized several landmarks immediately: the old water tower on the east side of town, the railroad bridge that crossed Miller Creek, and the distinctive curve of Highway 87 as it wound through the hills. But what caught her attention were the symbols scattered across the map. Small stars marked specific locations, each accompanied by what looked like coordinates or reference numbers. One star sat directly over what Maya knew to be Riverside Park. Another marked a spot near the old grain elevator, and a third indicated a location behind the First Baptist Church, the same church mentioned in the front of Elias's journal. At the bottom of the map, in Elias's careful handwriting, was a simple instruction: start with the star. Follow your heart and your compass. The journey matters more than the destination. Maya studied the map more closely, trying to decipher the numbering system. The star over Riverside Park was marked with a 1, suggesting it might be the logical starting point. She'd been to the park countless times over the years. It was where Grandma Ruth used to take her to feed the ducks when she was little, and where the whole town gathered for the annual 4th of July celebration. "What do you think, Scout?" Maya asked, showing him the map. "Ready for a treasure hunt?" Scout barked once, which Maya chose to interpret as enthusiastic agreement. She folded the map carefully and tucked it into her jacket pocket along with the journal, then headed for the RV's door. The walk to Riverside Park took about 20 minutes, with Scout trotting happily beside her, stopping occasionally to investigate interesting smells or greet friendly passers-by. Maya had forgotten how different life felt when you weren't rushing to get somewhere, when you had time to notice the way morning light filtered through the oak trees, or how the creek sparkled as it wound through town. The park was mostly empty, except for an elderly woman sitting on a bench near the duck pond, tossing breadcrumbs to a small gathering of mallards. Maya recognized her as Mrs. Elena Rodriguez, who lived in the house next to where the RV was parked. She was a small woman with silver hair always pulled back in a neat bun, and she had the kind of face that suggested a lifetime of smiling. Maya approached hesitantly, not wanting to interrupt what looked like a peaceful morning ritual, but Mrs. Rodriguez noticed her coming and waved her over with a warm smile. "Maya, isn't it? You're the young lady staying in that old RV on my neighbor's lot." "Yes, ma'am. I hope we're not causing any trouble." Scout and I tried to keep quiet. "Trouble?" Mrs. Rodriguez laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "Child, you and that sweet dog are the best thing that's happened to that old lot in years. Scout reminds me of another dog I used to know, one that belonged to a very special man." Maya's pulse quickened. "What kind of man?" Mrs. Rodriguez studied her face for a moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. "His name was Elias Hart. Drove that same RV you're living in now. He used to park it in different spots around town. Never stayed too long in any one place, but always seemed to show up exactly when people needed him most." "Did you know him well?" "Well enough." Mrs. Rodriguez tossed another handful of breadcrumbs to the ducks, watching them scramble for the treats. "Elias helped my family through a very dark time. My husband had been out of work for 8 months, and we were about to lose our house. One morning I found an envelope under our door with enough money for 3 months of mortgage payments and a note that said, 'From someone who believes every family deserves a safe place to call home.'" Maya felt goosebumps rise on her arms. This was exactly the kind of story Elias had documented in his journal. "We never found out who left that money," Mrs. Rodriguez continued. "But a few days later, Elias knocked on our door, asking if he could park his RV in our yard for a week, while he helped fix the Hendersons' roof down the street. He was so polite, so genuine, and that dog of his, a brown and white mixed breed, just like your Scout, that dog seemed to know exactly who needed comfort and when they needed it. "What happened to his dog?" Maya asked. Mrs. Rodriguez's expression grew sad. "Passed away about 6 months before Elias did. I think losing that companion broke something in him, but he kept helping people right up until the end. In fact, he came to see me shortly before he died, asking if I knew any young people in town who might need a fresh start. Said he was making arrangements for his RV to find its way to someone worthy." Maya reached into her pocket and touched the map, wondering if she should show it to Mrs. Rodriguez. Something in the older woman's eyes suggested she might know more about Elias's plans than she was letting on. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Maya said carefully, "did Elias ever mention anything about hiding things around town, like a treasure hunt or something?" Mrs. Rodriguez's face lit up with delighted surprise. "So you found his journal? I wondered if you would. He told me he'd left clues for whoever inherited the RV, said it was important that his work continue in some form." Maya pulled out the map and showed it to her. Mrs. Rodriguez clapped her hands together like a child who'd just been shown a wonderful toy. "This park is marked with a star," Maya said, pointing to the symbol. "Do you have any idea what I'm supposed to look for here?" Mrs. Rodriguez stood up and brushed breadcrumbs from her hands. "Follow me, mija. Elias showed me this hiding spot years ago, said it was for emergencies, or for someone special who might come looking someday." She led Maya to an old oak tree near the pond, its massive trunk scarred by decades of carved initials and declarations of love. At the base of the tree, partially hidden by overgrown grass, was a small metal marker that looked like it might have once been a survey stake. "Elias buried something here," Mrs. Rodriguez explained, "said it was the first step in a journey that would help someone understand what real treasure looks like. He made me promise to keep an eye on it, make sure nobody disturbed the spot." Maya knelt beside the marker, her heart racing. Scout immediately began sniffing around the area, tail wagging with excitement. This was really happening. She was about to discover whatever Elias' heart had left for her to find. As Maya began to carefully brush away the dirt and grass around the marker, Mrs. Rodriguez placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "That man had a gift for seeing potential in people before they saw it in themselves," she said quietly. "If he chose you for this journey, then you're capable of whatever it requires. Trust in that child, and trust in that dog of yours. Animals always know more than we give them credit for." Maya nodded, feeling the weight of expectation and possibility settling around her like a cloak. Whatever lay buried beneath this oak tree was more than just a hidden object. It was the beginning of understanding who she was meant to become. Maya carefully dug around the metal marker with her hands, not wanting to damage whatever might be buried below. Scout watched intently, occasionally whining softly as if he could sense her anticipation. Mrs. Rodriguez remained nearby, her presence both comforting and encouraging. About 6 inches down, Maya's fingers encountered something hard and rectangular. A small metal box, wrapped in waterproof plastic. She lifted it from its earthen hiding place and brushed the dirt away, revealing a container about the size of a jewelry box, made from what looked like tarnished silver. "Go ahead, mija," Mrs. Rodriguez urged gently. "It's yours now." Maya's hands trembled slightly as she unwrapped the plastic and opened the hinged lid. Inside, nestled in faded red velvet, lay an antique silver compass. The metal was etched with intricate designs around the edges, and the needle pointed steadily north, despite the compass's obvious age. Beneath it was a small, folded note in Elias's handwriting. Maya unfolded the paper and read aloud. "Every journey needs direction, but the most important compass is the one that points toward kindness. This belonged to my grandfather, who taught me that true north isn't a direction. It's a way of living. Use it to find the next steps on your path. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled warmly. Elias talked about that compass sometimes. Said it had guided his grandfather through difficult times during the Great Depression, when helping others was the only way people survived. Maya held the compass up to the light, watching the needle swing gently before settling on true north. There was something deeply satisfying about holding an object with such history, such purpose. She could almost feel the weight of all the hands that had held it before hers. "Tell me more about Elias," Maya said, carefully closing the compass and slipping it into her pocket along with the map. "Mrs. Rodriguez, how did he decide who to help?" The older woman settled back onto the park bench, and Maya joined her. Scout positioned himself at their feet, content to rest in the shade while keeping watch over his human. "That's a good question, and one I asked him myself once." Mrs. Rodriguez gazed out over the pond, where the ducks had settled into a peaceful flotilla near the far shore. "He told me he didn't really decide at all. He said need has a way of revealing itself to people who are truly looking. He would drive that RV around town, stop at the grocery store, the laundromat, the school pickup line, just listening and watching." "That sounds almost like spying," Maya said, though she meant no criticism. "Not spying, witnessing." Mrs. Rodriguez's voice carried the wisdom of someone who had observed human nature for many decades. "There's a difference between watching people for your own purposes and watching them with love. Elias had that gift of loving attention. He noticed when Mrs. Patterson started buying the cheapest possible groceries because her husband's disability check wasn't covering their medications. He saw when young Tommy Martinez's shoes had holes in them, but his mother was too proud to ask for help. Maya thought about her own recent experience with pride and poverty. It's hard to accept help when you're struggling, makes you feel like you failed somehow. Exactly, and that's what made Elias so special. He understood that the how of helping matters as much as the what. He never made people feel small or ashamed. Sometimes he'd arrange for someone to win a grocery store gift card in a contest that didn't really exist. Other times, he'd hire people for odd jobs that needed doing anyway, paying them more than the work was worth, but making it feel like they'd earned every penny. A memory surfaced in Maya's mind, a day about 2 years ago when Grandma Ruth had come home from the grocery store with bags full of food, claiming she'd won some kind of raffle. Ruth had been so proud, so happy about their good luck. Now Maya wondered if Elias' heart had been behind that unexpected windfall. "He helped my grandmother, didn't he?" Maya asked. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded knowingly. "Multiple times. When she was first diagnosed and couldn't work as much, mysterious gift cards started appearing in her mailbox. When she needed rides to medical appointments, neighbors would suddenly remember they were going the same direction. Elias had a talent for making help appear natural, like it was just the community taking care of its own." "But why me?" Maya's voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm just a kid with nothing to offer anyone." Mrs. Rodriguez turned to face her fully, her eyes kind but serious. "Child, you spent the last year of your grandmother's life taking care of her with more devotion than most adults show their own parents. You gave up school, friends, your own teenage years to make sure she wasn't alone. If that's not proof of character, I don't know what is." Maya felt tears threatening and blinked them back. She'd never thought of her care for Grandma Ruth as anything special. It had simply been what needed doing. "Besides," Mrs. Rodriguez continued with a small smile, "Elias believed that the best people to help others are those who've needed help themselves. He said it takes someone who's been hungry to really understand what food means to a struggling family." Scout chose that moment to stand up and stretch, then trot over to investigate a family of ducks that had wandered close to shore. His tail wagged as he watched them, making no move to chase or disturb them. Even in his curiosity, he was gentle. "That dog of yours reminds me so much of Elias's companion," Mrs. Rodriguez observed. "Same patient spirit, same way of bringing comfort. Just by being present, animals often know things we humans have to learn the hard way." Maya pulled out the compass again, watching the needle find its bearing. The map shows other locations. Do you know what's at those places? Some of them, yes. But I think the discovery is part of the lesson. Elias was a teacher at heart, even though he never set foot in a classroom. He believed people learned better when they found answers themselves, rather than being told what to think. Maya studied the map again, noting the careful way Elias had marked each location. The symbols weren't random. They seemed to form a pattern that would take her throughout their small community, from the church to the old grain elevator to several residential areas she recognized. Mrs. Rodriguez, what if I can't do what he did? What if I'm not capable of helping people the way he helped them? The older woman reached over and patted Maya's hand. Mija, you don't have to be Elias Hart. You just have to be Maya Washington. That compass doesn't point to someone else's true north. It points to yours. Elias understood that different people have different gifts, different ways of showing kindness. As if summoned by their conversation, Scout returned from his duck-watching expedition and settled at Maya's feet with a contented sigh. His presence was steadying, reminding Maya that she wasn't alone in whatever came next. The next location on the map is the old grain elevator, Maya said, tracing the route with her finger. Do you know what might be there? Mrs. Rodriguez stood up, brushing off her dress. Only one way to find out, but remember, it's not just about what you find. It's about what you learn along the way. Maya carefully tucked the compass and map back into her pocket, feeling their weight as both tools and responsibility. Whatever Elias Hart had planned for her journey, she was committed to seeing it through. For Grandma Ruth's memory, for Elias's, faith in her, and for the community that had already shown her such unexpected kindness. Most of all, she was ready to discover what her own version of true north might look like. The old grain elevator stood like a weathered sentinel on the outskirts of town, its concrete walls stained by decades of wind and rain. Maya had passed it countless times over the years, but had never really looked at it. Just another piece of abandoned infrastructure that spoke to better economic times. Now, approaching it with Elias's compass in her hand, she saw it with new eyes. Scout seemed energized by their destination, trotting ahead with purposeful steps and occasionally looking back to make sure Maya was following. The compass needle pointed steadily toward the base of the structure, where tall weeds had grown up around crumbling concrete foundations. According to the map, she was looking for something marked with the number 2 near the northeast corner. Maya circled the building slowly, using the compass to maintain her bearings and searching for anything that might indicate a hiding spot. The structure was larger than it had seemed from the road, easily 100 feet tall, with multiple levels and what looked like old loading docks on one side. Scout suddenly stopped near a section of foundation where the concrete had cracked and shifted over time. He began sniffing intently at a particular spot, his tail wagging with the excitement of discovery. Maya knelt beside him and found what looked like another survey marker, this one partially hidden by a rusty piece of rebar. "Good boy," Maya murmured, scratching Scout behind the ears. "You're better at this treasure-hunting business than I am." The digging was more difficult here than it had been at the park. The ground was harder, packed with years of Texas clay and scattered debris. Maya used a sturdy stick she found nearby to break up the earth, working carefully to avoid damaging whatever might be buried below. About a foot down, her makeshift digging tool struck something metallic. Maya cleared away the dirt with her hands and uncovered a larger container than the first one, a waterproof case about the size of a shoebox, secured with heavy-duty latches. Her heart pounded as she lifted it from its hiding place. The case was heavier than she'd expected, and something inside shifted when she moved it. Scout whined softly, as if sensing the significance of the moment. Maya carried the case to a nearby concrete slab where she could open it safely. The latches were stiff but functional, and when she finally got them open, she gasped at what she saw inside. The case was filled with coins, but not the ordinary currency she'd expected. These were clearly old and valuable. Silver dollars with dates she could barely make out, coins with foreign markings, and several that had the distinctive color and weight of gold. Nestled among them was another note from Elias. "If you've found this, you understand that some treasures are meant to be shared," the note read. "These coins have been collected over many years, each one saved for a time when they might do the most good. Their value isn't in what they're worth, but in what they can accomplish. Use them wisely, use them kindly, and remember that the greatest wealth is the trust people place in you." Maya stared at the coins, her mind racing. Even her limited knowledge of collectibles told her this was likely worth thousands of dollars, possibly tens of thousands. More money than she'd ever seen in one place, more than enough to solve her immediate problems and probably secure her future for years to come. But as she held one of the silver dollars up to examine it more closely, she heard Grandma Ruth's voice in her memory. "Money is just a tool, baby girl, like a hammer or a screwdriver. What matters isn't having it. What matters is how you choose to use it." Ruth had taught her that lesson when Maya was 12, after finding $20 in the grocery store parking lot. Maya had wanted to keep it, reasoning that whoever dropped it would never know where it went, but Ruth had insisted they turn it in to customer service, just in case someone came looking for it. "But Grandma," Maya had protested, "what if no one claims it? What if they just keep it for themselves?" "Then that's their choice to make," Ruth had replied, "but it's not ours. We do what's right not because we know how the story ends, but because doing right is who we choose to be." The $20 had been claimed within an hour by a tearful elderly man who said it was his grocery money for the week. The gratitude in his eyes had taught Maya more about wealth than any economics class ever could. Now, sitting beside the grain elevator with a fortune in rare coins, Maya understood what Elias Hart was asking of her. This wasn't her treasure to keep. It was her responsibility to distribute. But to whom and how? She thought about the families mentioned in Elias's journal, about Mrs. Rodriguez's stories of quiet acts of generosity. She thought about her own recent struggle with pride and necessity, how difficult it had been to accept help even when she desperately needed it. Scout seemed to sense her inner turmoil and pressed closer to her side, offering the comfort of his warm presence. Maya buried her face in his fur for a moment, drawing strength from his unwavering loyalty. "What would you do, boy?" she asked softly. "If you had all this money, how would you help people without making them feel small?" Scout's only answer was a gentle lick on her hand, but somehow that simple gesture helped clarify her thoughts. Animals didn't complicate kindness with pride or shame. They simply gave and received affection as naturally as breathing. Maya carefully closed the case and secured the latches. She couldn't make decisions about the coins here, surrounded by weeds and concrete. She needed to think, to research their actual value, and most importantly, to understand what needs existed in her community that this money could address. As she stood to leave, carrying the case under one arm, Maya noticed something she'd missed before. Carved into the concrete foundation near where she'd been digging was a simple message. E.H. 2019. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. She smiled at Elias's practical wisdom. He'd been planning this treasure hunt for years, carefully placing both literal and metaphorical seeds throughout their community. Now it was Maya's turn to tend the garden he'd started. The walk back to the RV gave her time to process what she'd discovered. The weight of the coin case served as a physical reminder of the responsibility now resting on her shoulders. She was no longer just a homeless teenager trying to survive. She was the keeper of resources that could change lives. But with that realization came a flutter of anxiety. What if she made the wrong choices? What if she helped the wrong people or missed someone who desperately needed assistance? What if she couldn't live up to Elias Hart's example of wise generosity? Scout seemed to pick up on her mood and kept close to her side during the walk, occasionally looking up at her with reassuring eyes. By the time they reached the RV, Maya had made one important decision. She wouldn't try to be Elias Hart. She would be Maya Washington, guided by her own moral compass and informed by the lessons both he and Grandma Ruth had left for her. The rest would have to unfold one choice at a time. The Millfield Public Library hadn't seen much renovation since the 1970s, but it had the one thing Maya needed most: free internet access and privacy to research without drawing attention. She'd hidden the coin case under her bed in the RV, taking only 3 representative coins with her for identification purposes. Scout waited patiently outside, tied to a bench in the shade where passers-by could pet him if they chose. Maya had discovered that Scout had a remarkable gift for making friends. People stopped to admire him, share stories about their own pets, and often ended up talking about their lives in ways they might not with another human. Inside, Maya settled at a computer terminal in a quiet corner and began her research. What she discovered made her hands shake slightly as she scrolled through online auction sites and collector databases. The silver dollars, dated from the 1880s, were worth several $100s each. The gold coins were worth even more. Conservative estimates suggested the entire collection could be valued between $50,000 and $70,000. She sat back in her chair, overwhelmed by the enormity of what Elias had entrusted to her. This wasn't just spending money. This was life-changing wealth for multiple families. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than the physical case itself. Finding some interesting reading, Maya looked up to see Mrs. Patterson, the librarian, smiling down at her. Mrs. Patterson was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the sort of gentle manner that made even shy children feel comfortable asking questions. "Just doing some research on old coins," Maya said, trying to sound casual. "Ah, a numismatist in the making. That's wonderful." Mrs. Patterson's eyes brightened with genuine interest. "Are you working on a school project?" Maya hesitated, then decided that some version of the truth couldn't hurt. "Not exactly. I inherited some old coins and I'm trying to figure out what to do with them." How exciting. Family heirlooms can be tricky that way. Sentimental value versus practical value. Are you thinking of selling them? Maybe. Or maybe using them to help people somehow. Maya surprised herself with the honesty of that answer. Mrs. Patterson's expression grew thoughtful. "You know, there are some families in town who could really use help right now. The Hendersons are struggling since Jim lost his job at the plant. Young Sophia Martinez needs dental work her family can't afford, and Mrs. Chen's been rationing her heart medication because the co-pays are so expensive." Maya's pulse quickened. These were exactly the kinds of situations Elias had documented in his journal. "Do you think people would accept help if it was offered anonymously?" "Pride can be a difficult thing," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "But most people struggling with real need would find a way to accept help that didn't make them feel diminished. The key is in the offering, making it feel like blessing rather than charity." That afternoon, Maya walked through town with new eyes, Scout trotting beside her as she observed the community Elias had served so quietly. She noticed things she'd missed before. The Hendersons' yard, usually pristine, showing signs of neglect that suggested bigger problems inside. The Martinez family's car, parked behind their house with an expired inspection sticker. Mrs. Chen walking to the pharmacy instead of driving, counting bills carefully before entering the store. Maya returned to the RV with a plan beginning to form in her mind. She couldn't help everyone at once, but she could start small, following Elias's example of careful, dignified assistance. Her first act was inspired by a memory of Grandma Ruth. Maya had watched her grandmother accidentally buy too many groceries and offer to share with neighbors, making it seem like she was doing them a favor by helping her avoid waste. It was a masterclass in pride-preserving generosity. Maya walked to the small grocery store and carefully selected items she knew the Henderson family would need: basic staples, children's snacks, and some of the small luxuries that had to be cut from tight budgets. She paid with cash from selling one of the less valuable coins, then arranged for the groceries to be delivered to the Hendersons with a note saying they'd won a random customer appreciation prize. The grocery store owner, Mr. Hassan, was initially suspicious of the arrangement, but Scout's presence seemed to reassure him that Maya's intentions were genuine. "That's a good dog you have there," he said, ringing up her purchases. "Dogs don't lie with people who have bad hearts." Over the next week, Maya found creative ways to channel small amounts of help to families in need. She paid Sofia Martinez's dental bill through an anonymous benefactor arrangement with the dentist's office. She arranged for Mrs. Chen's pharmacy to receive payment from a fictional medical assistance program. Each act required careful planning to preserve the recipient's dignity while meeting their genuine needs. But what surprised Maya most was how the community began responding to her increased visibility. People who had known her only as Ruth Washington's quiet granddaughter started greeting her warmly on the street. Store owners asked about Scout's well-being and her own adjustment to life without her grandmother. Neighbors invited her to church socials and community events. "That young lady has something special about her," Maya overheard Mrs. Rodriguez telling another neighbor. "Same spirit her grandmother had, always thinking about others before herself." Scout seemed to thrive on the increased social interaction. Children gravitated toward him during their walks, and he had an uncanny ability to sense who needed comfort most. Maya watched him spend extra time with lonely elderly people, energetic attention with children who seemed sad, and calm presence with adults who appeared stressed or worried. One evening, as Maya sat in the RV updating Elias's journal with her own experiences, she realized something had shifted in how she saw herself. She was no longer just surviving, she was contributing. The fear and desperation that had characterized her life since Grandma Ruth's death had been gradually replaced by purpose and connection. Scout lay at her feet, occasionally lifting his head to watch her write. Maya had started documenting her own acts of kindness, following Elias's example of recording not just what was done, but why and how it affected people. "Today I helped the Hendersons without them knowing it came from me," she wrote. "Mrs. Henderson cried when the groceries arrived, and I could see Mr. Henderson's shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. Grandma Ruth used to say that sometimes being useful is more important than being noticed. I think I'm finally understanding what she meant." As she wrote, Maya found herself planning her next steps. The map showed several more locations to explore, and she was beginning to understand that each discovery would bring new opportunities to serve others. But more than that, she was discovering her own capacity for the kind of thoughtful generosity Elias had modeled. The coins were just tools, as Grandma Ruth would have said. The real treasure was learning to see need clearly and respond to it, with both wisdom and compassion. In helping others heal, Maya realized she was healing too. Maya had been living in the RV for 3 weeks when she noticed something odd about the kitchen cabinet above the sink. Every time she opened it to retrieve dishes, it seemed to stick slightly, as if something was preventing it from closing completely. She'd assumed it was just warped wood from years of moisture, but Scout's recent fascination with that particular area made her reconsider. The dog had taken to standing on his hind legs and pawing gently at the cabinet, whining softly as if trying to communicate something important. Maya had initially dismissed this as normal dog curiosity, but Scout's behavior was becoming more insistent each day. On this particular morning, after Scout had spent 10 minutes staring intently at the cabinet, Maya decided to investigate more thoroughly. She emptied the cabinet completely and examined its interior with her phone's flashlight. What she discovered made her pulse quicken. The back panel of the cabinet appeared to be a false wall. There was a barely visible seam around the edges, and when Maya pressed against it, the panel gave slightly. She worked her fingernails into the gap and carefully pried the panel forward, revealing a hidden compartment behind the cabinet's back wall. Inside was an envelope marked "For Maya Washington" in Elias's careful handwriting. But this wasn't just any envelope. It was thick, clearly containing multiple pages and sealed with red wax that bore the impression of what looked like a compass rose. Maya's hands trembled as she broke the seal and unfolded several sheets of paper covered in Elias's writing. Scout seemed to sense the significance of the moment and settled quietly at her feet, watching her with alert eyes. "My dear Maya," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then my plan has worked and you've inherited not just a home, but a calling. I hope you'll forgive an old man's presumption in making arrangements for your life before you knew you needed them. But some things are too important to leave to chance, and your future was one of them." Maya's breath caught in her throat. This confirmed what she'd begun to suspect, that finding the RV hadn't been luck or coincidence. "I need to tell you something about your grandmother and me that she made me promise to keep secret until after she was gone. Ruth Washington was more than just a member of my community. She was one of my oldest and dearest friends, and the person who first taught me what true service looks like." The letter continued with revelations that reframed everything Maya thought she knew about her life. Elias and Grandma Ruth had met 40 years ago when they were both young parents struggling to make ends meet in a different Texas town. They'd been part of an informal network of families who helped each other through hard times, sharing meals, watching each other's children, pooling resources when someone faced a crisis. Ruth had a gift for seeing what people needed before they knew they needed it, Elias wrote. She could look at a family and know whether they needed groceries, encouragement, or just someone to listen. But more than that, she had a way of offering help that made people feel stronger rather than smaller. "I learned everything I know about dignified generosity from watching your grandmother." Maya wiped tears from her eyes, picturing Grandma Ruth as a young mother with that same gentle wisdom Maya remembered from her own childhood. The letter went on to explain how Elias and Ruth had stayed in touch over the decades, even as their lives took different paths. When Elias retired and decided to dedicate his remaining years to helping others, it was Ruth who suggested he use an RV to move between communities where help was needed. She told me that mobility would allow me to help more people while avoiding the complications that come with being a permanent fixture in any one place. Ruth was always the strategist between us. I was the one who wanted to charge ahead and fix everything at once, but she taught me patience and planning. The most stunning revelation came in the letter's 3rd page. When Ruth called to tell me about her diagnosis, we both knew what would happen to you when she was gone. "You're too young for the system to just leave you alone, but too old for easy placement in foster care. More importantly, you have the same gift Ruth had for caring about people, and we couldn't let that be lost to bureaucracy and institutional care." Elias had spent the last year of Ruth's life making arrangements. He'd worked with Jimmy at the car lot to ensure the RV would be available when Maya needed it. He'd coordinated with Mrs. Rodriguez and others in the community to create an informal support network. Most importantly, he designed the treasure hunt as a way to teach Maya about her own capacity for service, while providing her with the resources to help others. "The coins aren't your inheritance, Maya. They're your tools." Ruth and I both believed that the best way to heal from loss is to pour yourself into helping others heal from their own struggles. We've given you the means to do that, but the choice of how to use those means is entirely yours. The final pages of the letter contain specific instructions for accessing other hidden resources, not just more coins, but connections to people in surrounding communities who had been part of Elias's network of quiet helpers. He'd created what amounted to an underground railroad of compassion, and he was inviting Maya to become one of its conductors. "Your grandmother and I often talked about legacy," the letter concluded. "We wondered what we'd leave behind, what impact our lives might have after we were gone. I think we found our answer in you, Maya. You have the opportunity to carry forward something beautiful and necessary in this world. The knowledge that strangers can choose to care for each other, that communities can heal themselves from within, and that young people with generous hearts can change the trajectory of countless lives. Maya set the letter down and looked at Scout, who had remained patiently quiet throughout her reading. "Did you know?" she asked him softly. "Did you somehow know all along what this was really about?" Scout's tail wagged gently, and he nuzzled her hand with his warm nose. Whether he'd known or not, he'd been the perfect companion for this journey of discovery. Maya walked to the RV's small window and looked out at the community that had already embraced her and Scout. She thought about the families she'd helped, anonymously, the connections she'd begun to form, the sense of purpose that had gradually replaced her grief and fear. What had felt like coincidence and luck was actually the result of careful planning by two people who'd loved her enough to prepare a path forward. But more than that, she realized that Grandma Ruth and Elias had given her something more valuable than money or shelter. They'd given her the understanding that her life could matter in ways she'd never imagined. That a 17-year-old girl with a loyal dog could be part of something larger than herself. Maya picked up the letter again and reread Elias's closing words. "The question isn't whether you're ready for this responsibility, Maya. The question is whether this responsibility is ready for you. I believe the answer is yes." She thought about the families still struggling in their community, about the connections Elias had made in other towns, about the network of people who were ready to support her in continuing this work. The scope of what she was being asked to take on was both intimidating and exhilarating. Scout seemed to sense her thoughts shifting from confusion to determination. He stood up and went to the RV's door, looking back at her expectantly. There was still work to do, and he was ready to get started. Maya folded the letter carefully and tucked it into the journal alongside Elias's other writings. She was no longer just inheriting a mission. She was choosing to embrace it. The treasure hunt had been preparation for this moment, and now she understood that the real journey was just beginning. The revelation about Elias and Grandma Ruth's friendship had kept Maya awake most of the night, her mind spinning with the implications of what she'd learned. By dawn, she'd made a decision. If she was going to continue Elias's work properly, she needed to understand the full scope of what he'd been doing. The letter had mentioned other hidden resources and a network of helpers in surrounding communities. Maya spent the morning carefully examining every inch of the RV, looking for additional hiding places she might have missed. Scout supervised the search, occasionally directing her attention to areas that seemed promising. Behind the bathroom mirror, Maya found a manila envelope containing what appeared to be Elias's master record-keeping system. The envelope held a detailed list of every family he'd helped over the past 5 years, organized by town and type of assistance provided. The scope of his work was staggering. There were families in Millfield, of course, but also in 3 neighboring communities. Elias had helped pay medical bills, cover emergency car repairs, provide school supplies for children, and even fund small business loans for entrepreneurs who couldn't get traditional financing. Each entry included not just what assistance was provided, but follow-up notes about how the families were doing months or even years later. What struck Maya most was how Elias had tracked the ripple effects of his help. The young mother who'd received help with childcare so she could finish her nursing degree was now helping other struggling families in her community. The teenager whose car repair had been mysteriously covered by an insurance adjustment had graduated high school and was studying to become a mechanic, offering free services to elderly people in town. But the list also contained entries marked in red ink, families who were still struggling, situations that required ongoing attention, and new cases that had been identified but not yet addressed. Maya counted at least 15 active situations across the 4-town area that needed immediate help. The weight of it was overwhelming. Maya sat on the RV's small couch, The papers spread across her lap, and felt the full magnitude of what she was being asked to take on. How could one person, especially a 17-year-old with no real resources or experience, possibly manage such an extensive operation? Scout seemed to sense her distress and jumped up beside her, resting his head on her leg. Maya absently stroked his fur while studying the most urgent entries on the list. The Patterson family in Millfield had been facing foreclosure when Elias became ill. Their case was marked unresolved in red ink. The elderly Mr. Valdez had been identified as needing home repairs before winter, but no action had been taken. 3 different families had children starting school soon, without money for supplies or clothes. Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest that accompanied overwhelming stress. These weren't just names on paper. These were real people facing real crises, and somehow she was supposed to help them all. The coins from the grain elevator, valuable as they were, couldn't possibly cover everything that needed doing. She was startled from her anxious thoughts by a knock on the RV door. Scout barked once, his friendly bark, not his warning bark, and Maya opened the door to find Mrs. Rodriguez standing outside with a covered dish and a concerned expression. "I brought you some lunch, Mija," the older woman said, holding up what smelled like homemade tamales. "You look like you haven't been eating properly." Maya invited her in, grateful for the company and the distraction from the daunting paperwork. Mrs. Rodriguez settled at the small dinette table and immediately began fussing over both Maya and Scout, making sure they had adequate food and water. "You seem troubled, child," she observed, her kind eyes taking in Maya's scattered papers and worried expression. "Is everything all right?" Maya hesitated, then decided that Mrs. Rodriguez had already proven herself trustworthy. She explained about finding Elias's complete records and the scope of ongoing needs in their community and beyond. "I don't know how I'm supposed to help all these people," Maya confessed. "Elias had years of experience and resources I don't have. I'm just a kid with a dog and some old coins." Mrs. Rodriguez studied the master list for several minutes, occasionally nodding or making soft sounds of recognition when she came across familiar names. Finally, she looked up at Maya with an expression that mixed wisdom with gentle correction. "Maya, did you read these notes carefully? Really look at what Elias wrote about how he helped people?" Maya admitted she'd been focused mainly on the numbers and the scope of need. "Look here." Mrs. Rodriguez pointed to several entries. "The Hendersons, Elias, didn't just give them money. He connected Jim with 3 other men who were also out of work, and they started doing handyman services together. Now they're supporting each other and building a small business." She pointed to another entry. "Mrs. Martinez's family. Elias didn't pay for Sophia's dental work directly. He convinced Dr. Kim to start a payment plan program that helps all the families in town afford dental care." As Mrs. Rodriguez walked through more examples, a pattern became clear. Elias's greatest gift hadn't been his money. It had been his ability to see connections between people's needs and other people's abilities to help. He'd been less of a benefactor than a facilitator, creating systems and relationships that could sustain themselves. "You don't need to replace Elias," Mrs. Rodriguez said gently. "You need to understand what he was really doing. He was teaching the community to take care of itself." Maya looked at the list with new eyes, beginning to see not just problems that needed solving, but opportunities for people to help each other. The coins could provide seed money for initiatives, but the real value would come from connecting people who needed help with people who could provide it. An idea began forming in her mind, something ambitious that would require courage and coordination, but might actually be achievable. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Maya said slowly, "what if we brought everyone together? All the people Elias helped, all the people who still need help, all the neighbors who might want to contribute something. What if we had some kind of community event where people could connect with each other directly?" Mrs. Rodriguez's face lit up with excitement. "Like a resource fair, where people could offer services, ask for help, maybe find ways to work together?" "Exactly. But more than that, a celebration of what Elias started, a way to honor his memory by showing that the community he helped build is strong enough to sustain itself. The two women spent the rest of the afternoon sketching out plans for what they began calling the Community Connection Day. They would need a venue large enough to accommodate everyone, food to make it feel celebratory, and careful organization to ensure that people felt comfortable both offering and requesting help. Maya realized she would need to reveal her role. In continuing Elias's work, there would be no way to organize such an event from the shadows. The thought of being so public about what she'd been doing made her nervous, but Mrs. Rodriguez assured her the community was ready to embrace her leadership. People have already noticed the good things happening around town, she explained. They may not know it's you behind it, but they can feel the difference. They're ready to be part of something bigger. Over the following week, Maya threw herself into planning the event with an energy she hadn't felt since before Grandma Ruth's illness. She reached out to people throughout the community, explaining Elias's vision and inviting them to participate. In celebrating and continuing his work, the response was overwhelming. Local businesses offered to donate food and supplies. Churches agreed to promote the event. The high school principal offered the use of the gymnasium. Even people Maya had never met came forward with offers to help organize activities. But as the event date approached, Maya's confidence began to waver. Late at night, lying in her narrow RV bed with Scout curled up beside her, she questioned whether she was really capable of pulling this off. What if people expected her to have answers she didn't have? What if the event was a failure and people lost faith in the vision of community support Elias had worked so hard to build? Scout seemed to sense her anxiety during these moments of doubt. He would press closer to her side, offering the steady comfort of his presence. Sometimes he would gently paw at her hand until she petted him, grounding herself in his simple, unconditional faith in her abilities. 3 days before the event, Maya stood in the high school gymnasium, surveying the space where their community Connection Day would take place. Tables were arranged for different types of services and needs: job opportunities, childcare resources, home repair assistance, educational support. Local artists had volunteered to create banners celebrating community cooperation. It was going to be beautiful, Maya realized. More than that, it was going to work. People were already making connections just through the planning process. Mrs. Patterson from the library had connected with the Martinez family about tutoring services. Jim Henderson had started a handyman cooperative with 2 other unemployed men. Dr. Kim had established the sliding scale dental program Mrs. Rodriguez had mentioned. Maya fingered Elias's compass in her pocket and thought about true north. She was beginning to understand that her true north wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about becoming the fullest version of herself. And that version, supported by a community that was ready to take care of its own, might be exactly what Elias and Grandma Ruth had hoped for all along. Scout barked softly from across the gymnasium, where he was being petted by a group of volunteers. He looked back at Maya as if checking to make sure she was still confident in their shared mission. She was. 3 days from now, Maya would step forward as the public face of continuing Elias's work, and she was finally ready. The morning of Community Connection Day dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of autumn light that made everything look like it belonged in a painting. Maya had barely slept, her mind running through all the details that needed to fall into place. For the event to succeed, Scout seemed to pick up on her nervous energy, staying closer than usual as she moved around the RV getting ready. By 8 o'clock, volunteers were already arriving at the high school gymnasium to set up tables and prepare food. Maya watched from the parking lot as her carefully planned vision came to life, feeling a mixture of excitement and terror that made her stomach flutter. "You ready for this, boy?" she asked Scout, who responded by sitting calmly at her side and looking up at her with steady, confident eyes. His faith in her was unshakable, even when her own faith wavered. The first surprise of the day came when Mayor Patricia Jennings arrived with 2 town council members in tow. Maya had invited city officials as a courtesy, not expecting them to actually attend what they might view as an informal community gathering. "Miss Washington," Mayor Jennings said, approaching Maya with an expression that was polite but cautious, "I understand you've organized quite an impressive event here. The town council is very interested in what you're planning to accomplish." Maya felt her mouth go dry. She'd prepared for many contingencies, but a formal presentation to city officials hadn't been one of them. "Thank you for coming, Mayor Jennings. I hope you'll find it informative." What Maya didn't know was that Mrs. Rodriguez had spent the previous week carefully coordinating with city officials, preparing them for what they would learn about Elias Hart's final gift to the community. As people began arriving for the event, Mrs. Rodriguez quietly guided the mayor and council members to a reserved table near the front of the gymnasium. By 10 o'clock, the gymnasium was filled with more people than Maya had dared hope for. Families she recognized from Elias's list mingled with neighbors she'd helped anonymously. Local business owners talked with teenagers looking for part-time work. Elderly residents shared stories with young parents who were navigating similar challenges they'd faced years ago. At the center of it all, Scout had appointed himself as an unofficial greeter, moving between groups and somehow knowing exactly who needed his attention most. Maya watched him spend several minutes with a shy child who seemed overwhelmed by the crowd, then move on to comfort an elderly man who was sitting alone. The moment Maya had been dreading and anticipating finally arrived. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped to the microphone that had been set up near the front of the gymnasium and called for everyone's attention. "Friends and neighbors," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the space, "we're here today to celebrate something beautiful that's been happening in our community. Most of you know that we lost Elias Hart earlier this year, a man who spent his retirement helping families throughout our area. What you may not know is that Elias made arrangements for his work to continue." Maya felt every eye in the room turn toward her as Mrs. Rodriguez gestured for her to join her at the microphone. The walk from the back of the gymnasium to the front felt longer than any distance Maya had ever covered. Scout immediately fell into step beside her, providing steadying presence with every step. "I'd like you all to meet Maya Washington," Mrs. Rodriguez continued. Ruth Washington's granddaughter, and the young woman Elias chose to carry forward his mission of community support. The applause was warm, but uncertain. Maya could see question marks in many faces. She was, after all, just a teenager standing before a room full of adults, many of whom were facing serious life challenges. Maya had prepared remarks, but looking out at the crowd, she decided to speak from her heart instead. "I know some of you are wondering what a 17-year-old girl could possibly know about helping people with problems I've never faced myself," she began, her voice shaking slightly at first, but gaining strength as she continued. "6 months ago, I would have wondered the same thing." She told them about losing Grandma Ruth, about finding herself homeless, about the $1 purchase that had changed her life. She described discovering Elias's journal and learning about the network of quiet kindness he'd built throughout their community. "But what I've learned," Maya said, looking out at faces that were becoming more attentive and less skeptical, "is that Elias wasn't trying to create a charity. He was trying to remind us that we're all neighbors, and neighbors take care of each other." At this point, Mrs. Rodriguez handed Maya a manila envelope she'd been holding, the final piece of Elias's plan that even Maya hadn't known about until this morning. "Elias Hart left the community one more gift," Maya announced, her hands trembling slightly as she opened the envelope. "He purchased the old community center building on Main Street and had it deeded to the town, with the provision that it be used as a permanent space for the kind of neighbor-helping-neighbor activities we're demonstrating here today." The gymnasium erupted in surprised murmurs and conversations. The community center had been closed for 5 years due to budget constraints, and many people had assumed it would eventually be sold to developers. Mayor Jennings stood up, looking genuinely shocked. "Miss Washington, are you saying Mr. Hart Purchase the community center building outright? Maya nodded, pulling out the deed and donation papers Elias had prepared. He wanted it to be a place where people could come together to share resources, offer services, and support each other. He believed that permanent space for community connection was more valuable than any amount of money he could have donated. The mayor studied the documents, while the crowd watched in amazed silence. After several minutes, she looked up with an expression of wonder and gratitude. "These appear to be legitimate legal documents," she announced. "Mr. Hart has indeed donated the community center to the town, with very specific provisions for how it should be used." The applause this time was thunderous, but Maya could see that some people were still uncertain about her role in all of this. She was young, she was new to taking leadership, and she was asking them to trust her with something that had meant everything to a man they'd respected deeply. Scout seemed to sense the moment required something more. He left Maya's side and walked deliberately to where Mayor Jennings was standing, sat down politely, and offered his paw for a handshake. The gesture was so perfectly timed and charming that the entire room burst into laughter. The ice was broken. Maya looked out at faces that were no longer questioning but welcoming, ready to hear what came next. With the tension in the room dissolved by Scout's perfectly timed charm offensive, Maya found her confidence returning. She looked out at the crowd of neighbors and friends, people who had become family in ways she was only beginning to understand. "The community center is just the beginning," Maya continued, her voice steady now. "Elias left detailed plans for how we can work together to address the challenges our neighbors face, not through charity that makes people feel small, but through community connections that make everyone feel stronger." She gestured toward the tables around the gymnasium, where people were already making the kinds of connections Elias had envisioned. "Today, you can see how it works. Mrs. Patterson has connected families who need tutoring with high school students who need volunteer hours. Jim Henderson and his team are offering home repair services at cost to elderly residents. Dr. Kim has established sliding-scale healthcare programs that several other local professionals want to join." Mayor Jennings nodded approvingly as she surveyed the bustling activity throughout the gymnasium. "This is exactly the kind of community building initiative our town needs. Miss Washington, how do you propose to coordinate these efforts on an ongoing basis?" Maya took a deep breath, knowing this was the moment when she would either gain the community's trust or lose it entirely. "I'd like to propose that we establish a community connection committee with representatives from different neighborhoods and age groups. The committee would meet monthly at the community center to identify needs and coordinate resources." "And who would oversee this committee?" asked Councilman Robert Torres, his tone suggesting he was genuinely curious rather than skeptical. "I'd be honored to help coordinate it initially," Maya replied. "But the goal is for leadership to rotate among community members who have experience and skills to contribute. This isn't about one person being in charge. It's about all of us taking responsibility for taking care of each other." Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward with another envelope Maya hadn't seen before. "There's one more thing Elias arranged that Maya doesn't know about yet." Maya looked at her in surprise as Mrs. Rodriguez handed her the envelope. Inside were scholarship documents establishing the Ruth Washington Memorial Education Fund, a scholarship program designed to help young people from struggling families attend college or trade school. "Elias funded this scholarship in your grandmother's memory," Mrs. Rodriguez explained. "But he also made you the first recipient. He wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to continue your education while you're learning to coordinate community service work." Maya stared at the scholarship documents, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of Elias's planning. He'd anticipated not just her immediate need for shelter and purpose, but her long-term need for education and stability. The scholarship would cover tuition at the community college, allowing her to study social work while continuing to live in the RV and coordinate community service activities. "How much planning went into all of this?" Mayor Jennings asked. "Clearly, amazed by the comprehensiveness of Elias's arrangements. Years, Maya said quietly, thinking about all the journal entries she'd read, all the careful observations Elias had made about community needs and potential solutions. He spent years watching, listening, and planning ways to help people help each other. Dr. Sarah Kim, who ran the local family practice, raised her hand to speak. "I'd like to make a proposal. We've all seen how Scout has been interacting with people today. He has a natural gift for providing comfort and emotional support. I'd like to suggest that we officially recognize him as our community therapy dog, available to visit nursing homes, schools, and families in crisis." The suggestion was met with immediate and enthusiastic approval. Scout, as if understanding that he was being discussed, wagged his tail and made a circuit of the room, receiving pets and praise from people who were already growing attached to his gentle presence. All in favor of establishing the community connection committee with Maya Washington as initial coordinator, Mayor Jennings called out. The response was unanimous, not just approval but enthusiasm. Maya looked around the gymnasium and realized that something beautiful was happening. People weren't just accepting Elias's vision, they were embracing it and making it their own. Over the next hour, committees formed naturally around different areas of need. Parents organized childcare cooperatives, teenagers established tutoring networks, local professionals created sliding-scale service programs. Elderly residents with specific skills offered to teach them to younger community members. Maya moved between groups, facilitating connections and taking notes about who was interested in what kinds of ongoing involvement. But what struck her most was how little direction people actually needed. Given the space and opportunity to help each other, they were creating solutions she never would have thought of herself. As the formal program wound down and people began to mingle more freely, Maya found herself surrounded by community members who wanted to thank her, share their own stories, and volunteer for various aspects of ongoing coordination work. "You know," Mrs. Martinez said, approaching Maya with her daughter Sophia in tow, "when Sophia's dental work was mysteriously covered last month, we suspected it was connected to the other good things that were happening around town. We hoped we'd get a chance to thank whoever was behind it." Similar stories emerged throughout the afternoon. The Hendersons had suspected their grocery store prize was actually community kindness. Mrs. Chen had wondered about the medical foundation that had helped with her prescription costs. People had been aware of the pattern of help, even when they didn't know the source. "We've been waiting for someone to help us organize a proper response," Mr. Henderson explained. "We wanted to pay it forward, but we didn't know how to coordinate our efforts." By the time the event ended, Maya had a notebook full of names, contact information, and specific commitments from people who wanted to be part of ongoing community support work. More importantly, she had a clear sense that the community was ready to take ownership of Elias's vision and make it sustainable. As people began cleaning up and saying their goodbyes, Scout made one final circuit of the gymnasium, as if conducting a quality inspection of the day's work. He returned to Maya's side with his tail wagging and a satisfied expression that suggested he approved of what had been accomplished. Maya knelt down and hugged him, overwhelmed with gratitude for his steady support throughout the day. "We did it, boy. We actually did it." Scout licked her face once, then sat calmly beside her as she looked around the nearly empty gymnasium. Tomorrow, the real work would begin, but today had proven that the community was ready for it. 6 months later, Maya stood in the doorway of the refurbished community center on Main Street, watching the afternoon sunlight stream through windows that had been dark and empty for too long. The building hummed with activity, tutoring sessions in one room, a job skills workshop in another, and the monthly Community Connection Committee meeting preparing to begin in the main hall. Scout lay contentedly near the front desk, wearing the official therapy dog vest that Dr. Kim had presented to him after he completed his certification training. 3 elementary school children sat with him, taking turns reading from picture books as part of the after-school program. His patience with young readers was legendary now, and parents often requested specifically that their children practice. With Scout, when they were struggling with confidence, Maya checked her watch and gathered her materials for the committee meeting. In her bag was a new journal, one she'd started keeping to document the ongoing evolution of Elias Hart's vision for community care. The entries chronicled success stories, challenges overcome, and new ideas suggested by community members who had taken ownership of the mission in ways that surprised and delighted her. "Ready for tonight's meeting?" asked Mrs. Rodriguez, who had become Maya's unofficial mentor in the art of facilitating community cooperation. At 73, she brought decades of experience to their planning sessions, along with an intuitive understanding of how to help people work together effectively. "I think so," Maya replied, though she still felt a flutter of nervous excitement before each monthly gathering. The committee had grown to include representatives from all 4 neighboring communities, and their projects had expanded beyond what even Elias might have imagined. The main hall filled gradually with familiar faces, people who had been strangers to each other just months ago, but who now collaborated regularly on various community support initiatives. Jim Henderson had expanded his handyman cooperative to include electrical and plumbing services, employing 6 men who had previously struggled to find steady work. Mrs. Patterson had established literacy programs that paired adult learners with high school volunteers. Dr. Kim had convinced 3 other medical professionals to join her sliding-scale healthcare program. But what struck Maya most powerfully was how the relationships had evolved beyond simple service provision. People who had met through the committee were becoming genuine friends, sharing holiday meals and celebrating each other's milestones. Children from different neighborhoods played together during community events. Elderly residents found themselves with regular visitors who enjoyed hearing their stories and learning from their experience. "Let's start with success stories," Maya said, calling the meeting to order. This had become their traditional opening, a chance to celebrate progress before tackling new challenges. Mrs. Martinez raised her hand. The Martinez-Henderson Childcare Cooperative celebrated its 3-month anniversary this week. "We're now providing care for 12 families, and 3 of the parents have been able to return to work or school because they have reliable, affordable support." Similar reports came from around the room. The community garden project had produced enough surplus vegetables to stock a small food pantry. The skill-sharing program had resulted in a grandmother teaching canning to young mothers while learning social media management from teenagers. The transportation cooperative had helped 15 elderly residents maintain independence by providing reliable rides to medical appointments and grocery shopping. Maya took careful notes, but she also found herself observing the dynamics in the room. People listened to each other with genuine attention. They offered suggestions and support without being asked. They celebrated each other's successes with authentic enthusiasm. Elias had been right. Given the opportunity and framework, communities really could learn to take care of themselves. "New business," Maya announced, consulting her agenda. "We've received a request from Riverside County to help them establish a similar community support network. They're offering to cover travel expenses for a small team to spend a weekend training their initial volunteers." The discussion that followed was animated and positive. Several committee members immediately volunteered to share their experience with other communities. Scout seemed to pick up on the excitement in the room. His tail wagged continuously as he moved between the children who were reading with him. After the meeting ended and people began saying their goodbyes, Maya walked slowly through the community center, turning off lights and making sure everything was secure for the night. The building had been transformed from an abandoned shell into a vibrant hub of community activity, but more than that, it had become a symbol of what was possible when people chose to care for each other. She paused at the memorial wall that had been installed near the main entrance, a collection of photos and quotes celebrating community members who had made significant contributions to local life. Elias Hart's picture held a place of honor, alongside a photo of Grandma Ruth that Maya had contributed, but the wall also included pictures of people who were still very much alive and active in the community. Recognition that building a caring community was an ongoing effort that required many hands and hearts. Outside, the late spring evening was soft and welcoming. Maya walked toward the vacant lot where her RV still sat, though it no longer felt like desperate shelter. It had become home in the truest sense, a place where she felt safe, comfortable, and purposeful. Mrs. Hernandez had offered to let her park permanently on the lot, and Maya had gratefully accepted. The RV itself had undergone its own transformation. Maya had repainted the exterior in bright, cheerful colors and installed a small awning that created additional outdoor living space. Inside, Elias's hidden compartments had been repurposed to store supplies for various community projects. The small space that had once felt like a last resort now felt like mission headquarters. As Maya settled at her dinette table with Scout curled up beside her, she opened her journal to make the day's entry. The practice of documenting community service work had become as natural as brushing her teeth, a way of honoring both the progress being made and the people making it possible. 6 months since Community Connection Day, she wrote, and I'm finally beginning to understand what Elias and Grandma Ruth saw in me that I couldn't see in myself. I'm not trying to be them. I'm learning to be the best version of me, guided by the values they taught me, but expressed in my own way. Maya paused in her writing to look out the RV's window at the lights of the community center, still visible in the distance. Tomorrow, she would attend her social work classes at the community college, funded by the scholarship Elias had established. Tomorrow evening, she would visit 3 families who had requested assistance through the committee's support system. Tomorrow night, she would work on plans for the summer youth employment program that local businesses were eager to support. But tonight, sitting in the RV that had saved her life in more ways than one, with Scout's warm presence beside her and the knowledge that she was part of something larger than herself, Maya felt the deep satisfaction that comes from living with purpose. She picked up her pen and finished the day's journal entry. Some treasures are measured in gold and silver. Others are measured in the connections we build and the hope we kindle in dark places. I'm rich in ways I never imagined possible, and I'm just getting started. Outside, the Texas stars shone down on a community that had learned to shine for each other.